and gentlemen, welcome to another great edition of the Stoop, where we talk hoops, hoops, and more hoops. I'm your guy, TJ. Thank you for tuning in once again. I got to introduce my guy, my player partner, my co-host, the man with the plan, Kev P. Talk to the people, bro.
Hello, everybody. I'm just happy to be here.
Kev P, listen, if you want to talk about somebody in the 90s that lit the Big Ten on fire, that's our special guest coming up today. Listen, hailing from Columbus, Ohio, he was a monster, hailing at 6'9". He had a pro career that spanned 11 years. Internationally, he was dominant and a slam dunk champion overseas, too. When he got to the Sacramento Kings, he was super instrumental in resurging the program and resurging the team, and gave some electrifying dunks and some dazzling blocks and some great rebounds. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the pleasure of bringing to the Stoop today, Mr. Lawrence Funderburke. Mr. Funderburke, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, man. It's my honor to be here, gentlemen.
Appreciate you. So, Mr. Funderburke, we're going to get right to it this evening, if you don't mind. Question is, who put the ball in your hand first? When were you first introduced to basketball?
You know, I loved all sports. Actually, football was my first love. But when you're tall, you're thin, and you talk a lot of trash, that's a bad recipe for a football player, fellas. So I'm just keeping it real. But when I was eighth grade, I fell in love. We played this game when I was not in eighth grade. I'm sorry, I was 8 years old. It was 10-6. I remember scoring 6 of the 10 points, and I said, maybe I might try this basketball thing out. But it was when I was 8 years old playing, I fell in love with the game, all sports, but basketball, I always say, is one of the games that you can get better at all by yourself. I love it, particularly in a hood, in the ghetto. You just give me a basketball, give me a hoop. That's all I need. I'm good. And I love the game because it's not only a great game in terms of what you're able to see, and particularly our impact as African Americans on the game of basketball, but also it's very therapeutic. I think basketball is very therapeutic. It's a way, you can get away from the noise, the nonsense of the hood and your household, whatever the case may be. Basketball was kind of my sanctuary. Many players have said that through the years, and that's what I always enjoyed about it. A lot of chaos on the home front, but I was able to get away from that and be on the basketball court and do my thing.
Amazingly. So with that being said, you started playing, you say you were well-rounded and versed in a lot of different sports, but at what age did you think you could be able to do something with the game of basketball itself?
Yeah. As I said, I played football all the way up until high school, and then at 6'3" and about 140 pounds, that wasn't going to work, So really, I started really putting myself into the game probably in the 9th grade. I was in 8th grade. I got cut from an AAU basketball team. I remember when I left the practice facility that day, I said, you know what, all of the guys who were on that team, I'm gonna be better than. I didn't know how that was, but I said, I'm putting in work, whatever it takes. And it really, sometimes you need a wake up call. Sometimes you need something to say, you know what, if you really are about this game, if you really want to be great at whatever it is, right, there's got to be a catalyst. So getting cut in the 8th grade from that AAU team really woke me up. I said, I'm gonna be the best player in the country. And people laughed at me. And though I wasn't the best player, I came up short. Kenny Anderson was the best player coming out of high school in 1989, but I finished in the top 5. And, I said, when you put forth the work and you are determined to be great at it, and you want to prove the naysayers, not necessarily wrong, but what's inside of you that's right. And that's when I fell in love with the game, really that 8th grade when I got cut, and then my 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade years when I really started putting in the work. With no guarantee, as I said, there's no guarantee you're going to be really good at anything. But guess what? You're not going to know if you're going to have any results unless you put in the work.
Absolutely. You had to put in the work. You wanted to get your way out of the Sullivan projects in Ohio. And aside from that work, you were big on the 3 B's, being Bible, books, and basketball, which was ultimately your way out. Can you tell us about the significance of those things helping provide a way out for you?
Yeah, I was raised in a church like a lot of kids, particularly in the inner city. Obviously, you go on your own and drift down the wrong path, but the Bible was critically important for me. I always say that one of the verses is that really scared me and blessed me at the same time was, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever man sows, this shall he also reap. And whether you're a man or a woman, sowing and reaping is biblical, which means if you put forth the work, if you have the right inputs, then you're going to have some outputs. But also in terms of if your lifestyle is out of control, you're going to pay a heavy price for that as well. And particularly when you're in basketball, there's a lot of things that you can take advantage of, but they can take advantage of you. So the Bible has really kind of always been my solitude. And then, books was second. Most people know me as a basketball player, but I always love sports. And I always tell athletes too, don't just be stereotyped just being a ball player, be more than that and really expand your mind. I always say this, and when I don't get asked to speak at a lot of college campuses because I keep it real. And I said, when you're an athlete, particularly on the college level, it's not about the next 4 years, it's about the next 40 years. And oftentimes they steer us, I'm talking about Black athletes, right, to meaningless degrees, basically saying, don't focus on anything from the neck up, only from the neck down. But I never bought into that narrative, particularly being Black, liking school, actually loving school, loving to read. At any given time, I'm reading between 7 to 10 books. And they've said about us as Black folks, if you don't want us to know something, put it where?
In a book.
Put it in a book. And we got to read, because I always tell people, if we can't get math, we can't get life. You ain't got to love it, but you certainly have to respect it, right? And then also when it comes to reading language arts, if you can't get language arts, then how are you going to be able to present yourself? What is your value proposition going to be? Who's going to take you seriously? And those are the two subject areas on the ACT test that Black folks, Black kids struggle with the most. Yes, it's a culturally biased test. We know that. But that is the single biggest issue is our disdain oftentimes for math and then for reading. And if you read, it expands your mind. It's not just in terms of what you're able to learn and get in the mind of the author, but reading allows you to, guess what, gentlemen, it allows you to read people, read situations correctly, right? Read yourself correctly, and not just correctly, but clearly and contextually as well. So books, academics, I was always told, if you're trying to be white, you're trying to be smart. No, I was trying to be right and get out of that neighborhood. So we still have that to this day, when academics, and sometimes we promote athletics above academics, and that's the wrong model. We know that you can have them on par and you can excel in both of them. And then the last one is obviously basketball. As I said, it was kind of my sanctuary. I love basketball. Obviously, being poor, all you need is a basketball hoop. I didn't really have any nets, in the hood, ain't no nets, right? They tear all the nets down. Even the steel nets, even the chains, right? They tear them down, right? So, and one of the things is I became a really good corner shooter. People kind of know my game. I always shoot from the corner, but when you shoot from the corner, there's no backboard, right? So you just got to go straight in. And the reason why is because if I shot in the front, right, underneath our hoop in our projects, because my court was right in front of our housing project, right? It was mud there. So if you shot it, it would always go in the mud. So I shot on the side, so that way it went in the grass. So that was really how I really paved the way in terms of the corner. It's amazing how guys develop their favorite spots on the court, and there's always a reason. Mine was in the hood because of that dirt.
That's interesting. That's crazy. You managed to balance the 3 Bs as we discussed, ultimately becoming a 3-time All Big Ten performer and magna cum laude graduate in business finance at Ohio State. Was there anything in your childhood in particular that sparked you to have an interest in finance?
I had and particularly was math. I had a teacher, second grade teacher. When we think of the initials MJ, who comes to mind? Michael Jordan, Michael Jackson, Magic Johnson. For you rock and roll fans, Mick Jagger. Okay, but really for me was Mrs. Johnson. She was my second grade teacher. I had a crush on her. She was brown skin, had this jury curl. I know you guys remember that jury curl, right? And her juices drip all over my desk and stuff. But I love Mrs. Johnson because she believed me. She said, Lawrence, even though you're a kid that comes from a very difficult situation, you can be really good and you can have success in life. And she didn't set the bar low for me. As Michelangelo said, the problem for most of us is not that our aim is too high and we miss it, but that is too low and we reach it. We're tripping over the low bar of mediocrity. That's what happens all the time in the hood. These kids are great. We know there are geniuses there, and that's their job. A teacher's job is to draw it out of these kids, even in the hood. I met some of the most brightest kids in the hood. So Mrs. Johnson took a liking to me. And then when I got to the 3rd grade, she let me come back and grade the 2nd grade papers math test. But she gave me the master key, and I was able to see how problems came into play, came into motion, how there are steps. And we know if you skip steps, you are punished for that, right? Whether it's math or whether it's life. If you skip steps, you're going to be punished for that. So Mrs. Johnson, and then another teacher was Miss Devers. She was my 6th grade teacher. And I called her the other day out of the blue. She's 80 some years old. She started crying. I said, you had an impact on me. I remember she took me outside the class in 6th grade. She said, Lawrence, and she says, you're not like all the other kids. You have talent, you have abilities. And with that comes tremendous responsibility. I'll never forget that when she pulled me aside, because she says, you can't just coast along. You have too much inside of you. And particularly, you're very gifted and good at math. So she helped me develop that love for math, and obviously finance and math go hand in hand. So that was where I'll attribute it to Mrs. Johnson and then also Miss Devers for giving me that love for math.
All right.
It's Funderburke. If we look back in the 90s and also the early 2000s, the Big Ten had a lure, it had a mystique, and it was great. And like yourself, there was many of the guys that came out of those teams and those conferences back in the day that had just, they were household names. Do you thought that gets lost along the way because guys chase the league and not really worrying about being great within themselves or just chasing dollars?
You know, it's crazy because, you know, I'm of the opinion, and I know not everybody feels this way, that when you go to college, you should be there for 2 years, right? You should be there for two, because it takes you about at least 2 years to kind of find out who you are, what you want this game to do for you, but not just the game, but what you want this experience to do for you, how you want to leverage it, right? So it takes time for you to kind of mature and kind of find your way. And I think, you know, in the Big Ten back then, you had folks like Sean Respert and Michael Finley and Fab Five, Chris Webber, Juwan Howard, Jalen Rose, you know, and then you also had A.C. Earl at Iowa, Big Dog, Glenn Robinson, Indiana, Calbert Chaney. I mean, I can go on and on and on. I know I'm missing some guys. Then, you know, Jimmy Jackson, who's arguably one of the best players ever to play in the Big Ten, my teammate, you know, so we had that. And I think it was when it really went into the team. Now you're right. It gets lost in the shuffle. It's about the person. It's about the individual, and it's about chasing those dollars. And really, when you don't understand what team means, and particularly basketball is a team game, you realize that you're going to struggle, not just in terms of on the court, but you can struggle in life as well, because life, I always say, is not about you. It's about everybody else. And really, you should learn that as early as you can. But you're right. That's a great point. I see the game has pivoted so much where it's become so individualized. You look at the game, and with that comes a lot of baggage as well.
And I'll be honest with you, Mr. Funderburke, you staying and developing, it created a bigger buzz for you and a better brand. Like I said, you became a household name. I know there's probably strife and hardships when you're in college because they take so many things from you. Like you said, from the neck down, they just want to utilize you, but still, you become your identity. So I appreciate that. Appreciate that.
Well, I would just say on that, with, you know, and for me, the longer I stayed, the more it hurt my draft status, right? Because we played the Fab Five in 1992. I was a sophomore. If I would have probably came out, I would have got drafted a lot higher. However, I'm glad I stayed. I got my degree, right? Even though it cost me money, because now no one really cares about Lawrence Funderburke, the highlights per se, right? If you're not Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson or someone like that, it's really, what is your value proposition? Right. And if you have a value proposition, then people will take you seriously. When I go in the corporate world and I go speak to people, and I have people who reach out to me, they're really saying, I value your brand and particularly your intellectual capabilities. That is really where I tell these young athletes, don't get stereotyped just seeing you're an athlete, because what happens when that ball stops bouncing? What are you going to do with your life now? Who's going to use you, right? Or are you going to continue to be used by the game, you know?
Absolutely. Well, let me say this. My best friend's from Warren, Ohio, and I mentioned the fact that we're going to be interviewing you today, and he dropped the phone screaming. So trust me, you a household name, sir. Appreciate that. Speaking of which, part of my love of education, I'm a big doc fan. I love documentaries from top to bottom. And in the ESPN 30 for 30 doc, like you said, you guys had epic matchups against the Fab Five. Let's talk about the epicness and how big the Michigan versus Ohio State rivalry were, and how were those games with you guys pinpointing yourself against the Wolverines?
You know, it was interesting because I know me and C Webb, we would talk about it all the time, you know, that rivalry. And, you know, I always tell people, we played them that season in 1991-92. We played them twice in the regular season and beat them pretty handily. And then when we played them in the tournament, we saw they were in their bracket. They really, I think, came of age and really had the maturity that needed to be there in order for them to say, you know what, we got to play as one unit, as a team. We have these names. They started the baggy shorts. Now these kids are wearing the baby shorts now. It's crazy now.
They're going backwards.
Yeah, exactly right. But the Fab Five, they really started it, you know, in that, the ball heads and kind of the brash and all that. And then had we beat them to go to the Final Four, probably the Fab Five wouldn't have had the mystique that they had, you know. Right. So it's pretty interesting. I never forget that. I remember Juwan Howard was doing the Cabbage Patch on the top of the scorer's table after the game, you know. And ironically, I bought a Final Four hat. We were playing in Minneapolis that year before the game. I said, we're gonna beat them. And when we went into overtime, Chris Gent missed about a 7-foot shot on the side. I said, we're going to lose, because they weren't afraid of us anymore. They had matured. And really we were worn down. I mean, they were just that talented, and obviously speaks for itself in terms of the careers that these guys had.
Absolutely. You had an epic career. Once you left Indiana, you of course had to sit out for a year, but between 91 and 93, it was it for you. Like 12-6, then your next year 16-6. You combined with JJ, my OG, and shout out to Mr. Jackson, that's my guy. Did some epic things. Let's talk about how in the era of duos now, because you talk about everybody's a duo in the league, and that's pretty prolific. You guys were a duo and took down everybody. How was it playing alongside of him, playing with him, working with him? And how was Coach Ayers so great in utilizing you guys to be a great 1-2 punch?
You know, Coach Ayers was really, I'll start with him first, was a player's coach. And it was good because obviously, like myself, I grew up in a single parent household in a ghetto, 3 older sisters, single parent mom. You know, that was rough growing up in a house full of women, but I survived. But you're out of balance, right? Right. But when you don't have any positive male influence, it really affects you in a profound manner, right? And that's why I didn't really last that long at Indiana, you know, playing for a white coach, yelling at me, getting on me. I didn't really have that discipline. I'm like, okay, I'm out. Because you respond sometimes too emotionally when you have that female dominance around your life. And Coach Ayers was a guy who we really appreciated, and we looked at it as a father figure, you know, for many of us who grew up in single parent households. And then playing with JJ, I mean, JJ, in terms of being all around, he could handle the ball, he could play outside, he could play inside, very unselfish. I always tell people, listen, and when he passed the ball, if you weren't paying attention, he's going to knock you right upside your head. So you had to make sure you always paid attention. And he was a guy that always brought it and wanted to win. And you know what? He said, even though he scored a lot of points, he did a lot of sacrificing for his team. And you see that today, as soon as guys get the stat sheet, they look at how many points they scored, not how many assists they had, not how many rebounds, not how many steals, right? They look at the stat sheet in terms of the points scored. And JJ was really a guy, I think, who had an all-around game, one of the best players ever to play in the Big Ten, particularly in the last 30 or 40 years, because of his ability and what he was able to play inside, play outside, handle the ball, do all of those things. And it was an honor for me to play with him. And I knew after he left, it was going to be very difficult and challenging because, you know, he was really the face and the identity for Ohio State basketball those 3 years he was in college.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's talk about the 94 draft class, your draft class. And it's in between the 92 draft class and the 96 draft class. But let's not take it for granted. I personally believe that the 94 draft class is the most underappreciated draft classes of all. Talk about being a part of that, because there's iconic names from the very beginning with Big Dog, Mr. Glenn Robinson. We talk about both Juwan Howard, Jalen Rose, even the guy that lit up the A10, Yinka Dare, yourself. My OG, my guy from where I'm from, Mr. Daniel Marshall. From top to bottom, there's great, and he's a former guest of ours as well. There were some great guys in the 94 draft, as well as Lamont Murray, Jason Kidd, Grant Hill. So just talk about that if you don't mind.
Yeah, you know, I think, you know, if you pull out, you know, Jason Kidd and maybe Grant Hill and even maybe Big Dog, a lot of those guys were really complimentary players, very effective. And I think sometimes that gets lost in the shuffle because when you're not, 25 and 10, or you're making an all-star, it's kind of like, well, they judge it based on what type of careers the guys have in terms of the superstar status, but not necessarily being effective as a complimentary player on the team. And, you know, like Daniel Marshall, very capable player, very good player. But there were a lot of guys in that class who were role players, had very productive and long careers, yes. You know, but sometimes you don't get into the shuffle when you get stuck, like you said, the 96, right? And then you had the 92 draft, you know, with Alonzo Mourning, Jimmy Jackson, Christian Laettner, all those guys, you know, so we kind of get squeezed. But certainly a lot of those guys were very good players, had long careers. And I remember, you know, seeing my draft status, thought I was going to go first round, and then end up almost getting not drafted. And a lot of that, I believe, had to do with the reputation in terms of, was he a head case? Could he fit in with other guys? And I remember, you know, playing at Indiana, it's amazing that that baggage, even though I had left it, still was lingering when I was getting drafted. And then also Dick Vitale. I don't know if you guys remember, he said some comments about me on national TV, and he apologized, but it certainly, I believe, maybe had some lingering effects in the minds of others in terms of, what's the quality of the character of this guy, and people don't understand, that when you have a reputation that's questionable, it's going to cost you in more ways than one. That's why I tell young people all the time, you got to protect your brand. You got to protect your brand. And I didn't protect my brand like I should have. And I was like, I don't care, but you should care, because your brand is really how you sell your value proposition.
Absolutely. So,
Absolutely.
And also talk about real quick, what was it like in that second round when Sacramento called your name? Talk about your thought process, what you were going through the day of, what took place.
Yeah. Well, another guy was a really good player, Brian Grant, power forward. It was him, and then they drafted Michael Smith from Providence. So basically, there were three, and then me. There were three power forwards. So they told me, they said, you know what, we're going to keep two power forwards. Obviously, we drafted you later than those guys, so more than likely they're going to make the team. So that's why I had to actually go overseas and play. But it wasn't. I looked at it as a slight at the time, but when you go overseas, you quickly learn how to be a professional, right? You got to be a professional. And I tell guys, look, that's one of the best things for me is going overseas, because you learn how to be a professional because you're in a foreign environment, right? And that was very difficult. That was tough. And then I came back and was prepared. So it probably was really a good thing for me, because I don't know in my mind if I was really ready, and particularly for the lifestyle. Let's keep it real. Okay, right. The lifestyle has destroyed a lot of guys. It's destroyed a lot of guys, not only in the NBA, but the NFL, Major League Baseball, and other professional sports.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
You mentioned earlier about role players and how essential they are to teams and the cohesiveness. And in the NBA today, so many teams are basically copying the Golden State style of play. However, your tenure with the Kings kind of set the table for that style of play. How fun was it to be on that team, and how competitive do you believe you guys would be if you were playing today?
Yeah, because when I first came, my first year, I was playing with Mitch Richmond and Oden Polynice and those guys, and then they made a pivot, and then they traded for C Webb, got Vlade Divac, and then Peja Stojakovic in the draft, but also White Chocolate, Jason Williams, and then Mike Bibby, who replaced him. Doug Christie came, and also Nick Anderson. Tony Delk, Bobby Jackson. Really some good pieces come together, and we really played unselfish. We had our own little quirks off the court, but we played a really exciting game. I remember Sports Illustrated dubbed us the greatest show on earth. I don't know if you remember that Sports Illustrated article, and we loved it, and people loved watching us play. Because of the way we passed the ball. We didn't have really set plays. We played the little Princeton offense, a lot of backdoor cuts, a lot of read, but we played free. And you're exactly right that the style today, pretty much everyone has basically mimicked that, but taken it to a whole nother level. Particularly you got bigs now shooting 5-6 threes a game. I think I shot maybe 6 threes my whole career, so the game has changed a lot, and I think it's more of a, I hate to say it, it's kind of more of a video game format now, because there's so much emphasis on scoring the basketball as opposed to beauty of playing, unselfish basketball sometimes.
Real quick, Mr. Funderburke, I want to say something. And I tell people all this all the time. If Shaquille O'Neal would have remained in Orlando, the Kings would have had world championships.
That's good.
That's a fact.
We should have beat them anyway. To be quite honest with you, that 2001, 2002. It was a really interesting. There were some tricky calls, some questionable calls, for that in that series. And though they had Kobe, they had Shaq, right? Robert Horry, Rick Fox, Derek Fisher. They had a good nucleus, but I thought collectively from top to bottom, we were a more talented team. Absolutely. But I'll tell you, one of the things that hurt us is the way we played. Sometimes our carelessness, right, in terms of how we passed the ball. And we always said. It haunted us, right? Because we did it in the regular season, and then when you get to the playoffs, each possession you get tighter and tighter and tighter. You got to take care of that basketball, and our bad habits caught up with us. And then we assumed that because we got there one time in terms of Western Conference Finals, we will get there again. And guess what? We never did. We never did. So you're punished. And I watch teams, and you got to take care of the ball. And not only that, you got to have good habits, and everybody's got to be on the same page. And we were I think we got caught up in our own success in terms of how we played, right? That free spirit that it cost us at a very dear moment, and particularly when you're playing the Lakers, right? Your room for error is very small, no matter what other distractions you may have that coming at you.
Absolutely.
Right, Cap.
I want to pivot for a second here. You're an author, a sought-after public speaker, financial guru, and proprietor of businesses.
Absolutely.
What's left on the bucket list?
You know, one of the things that I'm doing right now is I've started several things. I started this a couple things called the collaboration arena, which is what I'm doing right now, and is I'm reaching out to C-suite executives and also CEOs, particularly white males. You know, because obviously they have a target on their back, and for some of them for good reason. But I want to say, listen, what can I do to kind of help you come alongside to help you? Because at the end of the day, we gotta take this seriously in terms of Black and brown communities, and what does it mean? I always say, no justice, no peace, no justice, no peace. And my thing is, no just us, no just us, no peace, PIECE. And what I'm talking about is equity. We have to build equity. We got to have equity as people. I'm not just talking about financial equity. I'm talking about equity from an intangible nature, like I talked about, when it comes to school, when it comes to learning, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to things. What is our identity going to be as a people? So I'm saying, for Black and brown individuals, we got to move the ball forward. So my social activism is a little bit different from how others come about it. But I'm like, look, I'm gonna look out for my people, but I want to do it in a way where we're going to get better as a people, right? We're going to get past some of the stereotypes that I think have largely crippled us, you know, and saying, what can we do? So I'm really coming alongside the business community, particularly white males in leadership position, and then also the reparation moment. I really believe, fellas, this is the time where our reparations are now. The spotlight is on us, right? What is going to happen? I say that our value proposition has to be more than the color of our skin. We got to have some substance behind us, right? For people to take us seriously, because we have a window right now. What are we going to do? There's not going to be a plot of land or a pot of gold or promise of equality that we're going to be given. No. But we are giving opportunities. And I say the only way you're going to be able to capitalize on those opportunities is you got to have options. And obviously that will give you the optimism that you can capitalize on. But I think the spotlight is on us as Black folks. And I'm afraid I don't want us to blow it. I'm going to be honest with you. We got to step up to the plate overall, because now people are taking us seriously. All the injustices that have happened in the past historically with our ancestors and all that. What are we going to do right now with this moment? Is I think where we are, and I really challenge all athletes, and even if you're not athletes, you're the platform you have. How are we going to move the ball forward for our people, Absolutely. Black and brown individuals? That's kind of what I'm doing, and I'm challenging people, but I don't want to do it in a threatening way. I don't want to be pushed to the left or to the right politically. I'm staying down the middle, the lane that God has called me to, and I'm saying, hey, I want to help as many people move forward, particularly in this day and age. That's kind of really what I'm trying to do. And obviously, I tell people I don't really write books. I've written a couple of books for Black folks because, as I said, you know, Black people, what? We don't read. Like, we don't. I'm be honest. We don't read. Absolutely. We want to be entertained, but we don't want to be empowered. There's a big difference. So I'm one who practices what they preach. I got 3 degrees and I played pro ball for 11 years. I tell kids in the hood all the time, if I got 3 degrees, you can give me 1, right? You can give me 1. But you're going to have to take school seriously, and you're going to have to make some sacrifices. And I think that's one of the things that we have to do, gentlemen, is we got to value this right here, up here. This, we can be great upstairs, not just downstairs in terms of from the neck down. So I'm really, really challenging our community, right, and the business community, right, to step forward. I'll send you some additional documents that you can look at, because I really think that this day and age, we need some equity. Right, we need equity, and we need that in a big way.
Absolutely. Agreed. Go ahead, TJ.
No, go ahead, Kev. You got it. You're doing great.
Financial competence and evolution are often not taught in our communities. What's the best and most rudimentary advice you could give to those watching that they may need?
I'd say, listen, you know, when I talk to young people or anyone, I was like, what is your value proposition? And I'll ask them, well, who are you? Not your name, but who are you? What makes you you? And your value proposition is really what separates you or differentiates you from others, right? And how you're able to leverage the how of your who in terms of who you are, your qualities, your traits, your talents. How you're able to leverage that will determine your value proposition. If you have a value proposition, guess what? People are going to pay you for it. They gonna want to. When I go in there and I speak, I'm like, hey, I charge, you know, $5,000, 10 grand, whatever it is. I'm like, I have a value proposition, not just a story about basketball, but I want to help this business. They want to bring me in. And I tell young people all the time, what is your value proposition? That will tie into your brand. You got to protect it at all costs. And we talk about social media, right? All of these things, these kids have to be very careful what they put on social media, right? Because that speaks to your brand, right? So I say, number one,
it's
identify
forever.
your, yes, it is. That's exactly right. It doesn't go
Definitely.
away. I got 2 teenagers and I tell them that all the time. Got a daughter who's following in my footsteps. She's going to Ohio State on a swimming scholarship. And I tell my kids all the time, and you got to protect your brand and you got to have a rock solid value proposition. Number 2, you need to know how to leverage it, right? Because really your intangible qualities, gentlemen, will determine how much financial success you have, or the intangible. But we sometimes, as Black folks, we focus on the tangible first, right? I want the money, but don't learn the intangible qualities that are necessary, right? And what am I talking about? These are your legacy traits that will stand the test of time. This is what we really need to focus on. That's why I always say, what do we stand for as a people? Where are we going as a people, right? How are we going to get there? That's very, very important. Where's our leadership, right? To move us forward as a people. Who are they? So, you know, I get the rhetoric and all of that stuff, but we need some substance behind us, right? And then number 3, right? We need some sponsors and some mentors. So if you have, right, your value proposition, if you're leveraging it, you obviously need some people who are going to step forward and going to help you, right? Mentor you or sponsor you. It could be someone who you have a one-on-one relationship, or it's someone who can mentor you, all right, from afar in the book, right? So I think those are the 3 things, right? I didn't say anything about invest in this particular stock or put away this money or get this insurance product. No, you need to focus on your value proposition, how to leverage it, get some mentoring and sponsoring, right? And then from there, you can learn how to start your own business or whatever the case may be. But you got to do that first. Those are the first 3 things that I always say and try to challenge people, regardless of your age, on how to be successful in life.
Definitely.
Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Mr. Funderburke. Absolutely. We want to switch gears back to basketball for like 2-3 more questions, and we want to belabor yourself because we know you're very, very busy. But one thing people talk about, they look at the international game today as it presents itself with Giannis, and we talk about Luka, and we talk about the Joker, but you yourself and those great Kings teams played with 3 extraordinary international players in Vlade, Hedo, and Peja. Talk about how they transcended then and what it looked like now, and vice versa, in your opinion.
You know, I remember speaking at it was a transition program for kids in high school, from high school to college. I won't say the name, but I was there, and there was Bob Lanier. You know, Bob Lanier, the great center for many years, Milwaukee Bucks.
Yes.
And most of the kids that were there were African American. And he said something, because some of the guys weren't taking it seriously and weren't paying attention. You know, it really bothered me a lot as well. We take a lot of things for granted. This was many, many years ago. And then he stopped and he says, you know what? He says, he was working with the league then. And he says, you guys don't get it. You guys don't understand. He says, you're going to see that eventually that the draft will be 30, maybe 50% foreign players. Right. So what does that mean for the guys who are born in this country, domestic players? That means there are going to be less jobs available in the NBA for American-born players, and specifically for who? For African-American players. Right. And they're like, hey, why is that? Why is that? Because, you know, when we think about headaches and different problems or whatever, he said, look, the European guys, they can play. And now the league is global. And they're like, listen, we want to make sure that we can have a product, right? And then the products on the court, right, can have a value proposition that we can trust with the brand. But when you think about that, and I think about playing with Vlade and Peja and Hedo, I mean, these are guys now, you know, Dirk Nowitzki, you playing against him, and now you got Luka, and you got these players, they can play the game, and the game is global now, right? You're not just competing against the top players in America, you're competing against the top players around the world. And this is why I tell these guys all the time, like, man, you got to step up. You can't just think on a local level or a state level or even a national level. You're competing against around the world. And particularly for domestic players, they got to not only have their game, gentlemen, you know that, There's a game outside the game that you need to know how to play the right way. Let's be honest. Okay.
Definitely.
And if not, that can prevent you from ever realizing your dreams, and not only your dreams, but also being able to help your family and those who depend on you, man. Let's just keep it real. And I don't think people talk about this enough, man, in terms of the game and the dynamics and what's at play for our young people.
Mr.
Well
Funderburke,
said.
before I get to my last question, thank you for that. That insight is great. You're part of a brotherhood, an NBA fraternity. In this last 18 to 24 months, we've seen a lot of turmoil drastically in our country. And you've talked significantly about leadership. Talk about what it meant to see the NBA players in the bubble. Do you think the message was right, not right? Did you buy into, did you believe in it, being a part of this fraternity, a lifelong member? And what do you want to see as we move forward? Because listen, we've seen everything from 2016 to Colin Kaepernick taking a knee, and then that message got misconstrued. And now we really see what unfortunate demise of Mr. George Floyd with a knee being placed on his neck. So talk about how things are looking in your personal opinion with that.
When I think about, Black Lives Matter, do Black Lives Matter? Of course they matter, right? And we know I grew up in the hood, and I tell people, if you're watching the news and you're not African American, and in your mind you say, well, there they go again, killing each other. You just discounted the life of a Black person. In your mind, you discounted them, right? Because you haven't shown compassion or concern. Now, having said that, Black lives, of course, do matter, but I say Black legacies matter more. You must first live life before you have a fighting chance at a winning legacy, gentlemen, right? And legacy is merely the residue of a well-lived, a well-loved, and a well-learned life. That's legacy. That's really what we're after. Because if you have a legacy, your life automatically comes into play. So I'm big on legacy. Black legacies matter more because listen, a legacy stands the test of time while a life is trapped in a moment in time. Think about that for a second. Think about what that means. Point A to point B, that's your life. But your legacy, what? It transcends time. And that's what I'm after. I'm like, hey, let's focus on, yes, Black lives do matter, but Black legacies matter more. That's why I'm getting back to this. What is our legacy going to be as a people, right? When we think about the league, and I challenge the guys, I'm like, when I started my youth organization 20 years ago, I pivoted away from basketball and sports. I wanted to give kids some substance because not everybody's going to be a pro athlete or entertainer. You can still be successful, right, without having to play sports or to go down the field and go into the field of entertainment. So my thing is, I challenge all of the guys to come up with a script, to come up with a game plan to really empower Black and brown communities, right? And give them some substance beyond the game. So what does that mean? You need to be on the growth path before you challenge and push other people there as well. So I'll say this, and I'll say this because I see you want to chime in. Empowered people empower other people. You got to be empowered. I know you're in the league. That's your gig. That's your game. I understand that. But there should be some growth that you're doing to be able to be a role model to these kids, because it's not what you say, it's what you do that matters.
Throwing it back, did the league get it right? Are pro sports getting it right?
I think when you spotlight something, it's good, but I always say that just because you spotlight it, right, what is the game plan to actually move people forward, right? Because you can get
what next?
What's next, and what you get people emotionally right vested, but then from there has to be some rational movement that moves people forward, that they're better off and not just excited or amped up about a particular movement. Like I always say, I usually wear a hood whenever I speak. I always say I wear a hood, and I tell people I wear this hood not because of a movement, but because of a moment, because I remember the moment when I was in that hood. Now, when I go back to the hood now, right, and I put that hood on, that hood represents I'm covering the people who are in that hood that I'm responsible for to help them, right? So that's why I wear a hood, right? It's not because of a movement, it's because of a moment. Because a movement you can opt out of, but with a moment you can only opt in. It's about opting in right now to the moment, and a moment right now for us as a people. That's why I call it the reparation moment. And that's why I think the league and some of these places, yes, they brought attention to it, but how have we as a people, Black and brown individuals, how has it moved our communities overall? I get it, the athletes, are very successful. They're going to be fine. But what about Pookie and Ray Ray in a hood? I'll say this. I don't know if you know this, but they look at the test scores of third grade African-American males to determine how many prison beds to make available in each state. Let me say that again. They look at the third grade test scores of African-American males to determine how many prison beds to make available in each state. So they're basically saying if Pookie and Ray Ray are messing around in the third grade, we know so many of them are going to matriculate to the prison system. So let's just go ahead and get their bed ready for it. So my thing is, where's the preventative medicine that we need? What are we doing ahead of time, right? And I always tell people, math will work for you or it's going to work against you, but it always works in some capacity or another, right? So this is where I'm saying, what is our message going to be to really move the ball forward to help our community, right? That's why I said the spotlight is on us, the glare is shining bright, but what are we going to do? What are we going to do with this moment, right? And not just protest, not just talk about it, right? Not just wear things on our shirt or on our hats or whatever, but when I wear my hood, I'm going back in a hood and helping as many of those kids say, look, you can get out, but your responsibility is to go back and help as many others who are trapped and stuck and stranded there. That's what I'm doing.
Appreciate it. That was powerful.
Indeed.
Oh, appreciate that, Mr. This has been an extraordinary interview. Didn't even expect all of this, and you've been instrumental in so much and so many gems that you've given us tonight, and we really, really appreciate you. Want to end on the lighter side, if you don't mind, and talk about basketball one last time. You guys were one of the greatest shows ever to run up and down the floor. Energetic, exciting, a lot of movement, is a great way. But if you don't mind, for our viewers, could you share one special white chocolate story that you have before we take over?
You know, Jay, when I'm playing with Jimmy Jackson, I always said, you know, if you weren't paying attention when he had that ball. Now with JJ, I'm talking about with Jay Will, right? He would, and I tell you, for white chocolate, a white guy, his game was incredible. Not only was he fast, he was quick, he had long arms, he could jump, he was talented, you know, and I always say he was a smaller version. I met Pistol Pete right before he died. I met him in high school. We played in this tournament. I was in high school. I played Pistol Pete. I watched Pistol Pete. Obviously, I didn't get a chance to watch him play, but I watched a lot of his highlights. And then Jay Will was kind of a smaller version in terms of what he was able to do. And he would do all these tricks before practice and all that. I don't know if you guys ever heard of some of the things he would do in practice, but it was phenomenal what he would do when he would, you know, take behind his back and hit the ball. I mean, you know, he was just really a show, really in and of himself, to be quite honest with you. And I remember one of the things when he came down, he came and he did a move, and then he faked like he was going to pass, and he brought it back and passed it this way. And I remember I've been on some of those highlights, and I was very fortunate to be on those. And his wife and my wife were really good friends. So Jay Will, and it's amazing that people, like, when they say white chocolate, I'm not talking about the chocolate milk. I'm talking about white chocolate, the player. And then these kids like say white chocolate. It's amazing when they ask me questions about playing with him, but certainly was one of the most dynamic players, I believe, to play in the NBA for a long, long, long time.
Mr. Funderburke, we want to give you the opportunity, please, because you're doing so much to empower people, young and old, the community, and make sure we have financial competency, financial literacy. So please share with us where we can get additional information and things that you got going, programs from top to bottom. Please do so.
Yeah, you know, I've written a couple books. If you want more information, you just go to my website, Mr. Fundy, MrFundy.com. My latest book is called Momentum Power Play. Obviously, it's a play off of sports, right? And what is momentum? How do you develop momentum? What is momentum important for? And it's how do you get momentum if you've lost it, right? How do you get it back once you've lost it? How do you keep it going once you have it? If you've never had momentum, how do you get it back? So momentum is very, very important. I talk about the most important chapter, I think, in there is chapter 20, which is deep-rooted daddy issues and the impact of the difference between fathers and dads, and what is momentum in life, and particularly what's hurting so much in terms of our community, you know, some of the things that we need, and really giving young people the right momentum, and people who've been down on their luck, so to speak. And I wrote another book called Sociopsychonomics, which is a book about the brain and about social classes in America and why certain people do what they do once they come into money like me. I mean, even to this day, you know, I'll use the same paper towels over and over and over again, right? Or when my wife's cutting up fruit, right, I tell her, don't cut don't throw those cords away, right? Because I'm nibbling around it, because I remember growing up in the hood. What did your mom say? right?
Don't
Eat
waste
all of
no
your food.
food.
Yeah, and she says, you know, there's people starving somewhere else, and if you don't eat, even though we didn't have much, right? So you never really forget some of those things, but you take a lot of those habits, even if you move from poverty to the middle class or to the upper class, you really take a lot of those same habits and you're not even aware of that. So they can learn more, a little bit more about me on the website, and then also some of my speaking engagements. I love speaking and empowering people, particularly even in this virtual world. You still can connect and make a difference in the lives and legacies of others. So I always tell people, if you transform a legacy, gentlemen, this is what I'll leave you with. If you transform a legacy, you automatically change your life in the process. Legacies is what I'm after. If you change the legacy, you automatically, right? If you transform a legacy, you automatically change your life in the process. That's really what it's about.
Well, I'll tell you this, you changed my life and you opened me up to some different things. And I'm gonna look at things different. I can't wait to, once we're done this evening, watch this again, because there's so many different jewels you dropped today. And Mr. Funderburke, we know you're really, really busy and you have a lot going on, but we thank you for coming on the Stoop today. And I can't speak for Kev, but this definitely enlightened me to so much. And please continue to do what you do. People are benefiting from it, so we thank you for that.
Hey, man, thank you. And I always say, man, just keep challenging people, man. Keep challenging people to be better than where you are. Not bitter, but be better than where you are. That's what it is. We got to be on this growth path. And I tell people, don't be an outlier. If you're an outlier, you're never going to be inlier. You're not going to be stuck on that line. Be an outlier. There's a book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. I don't know if you've heard of that book, if you read that. But I tell people, look, if you're an outlier, somebody's always going to have a need for you, right? That means your value proposition is going to be such that it's going to be shining bright when everybody else is glimmering in the darkness. All right.
Thank you again, Mr. Funderburke. We wish you well. We wish you all the best. To you and your family during this time and climate, please be well. On behalf of my partner, Kev Pete, it's been another great episode of the Stoop, guys. Take care.